Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of the Parkinson's Policy Podcast, where we advocate together to raise awareness and advance meaningful policy for the Parkinson's community. Directly from Washington, D.C. at the U.S. Capitol and beyond, we bring senators, representatives, researchers, and advocates together to amplify the voices of people living with Parkinson's. My name is Dr. George Ackerman, Sharon's son, the founder of TogetherForSharon.com, joined by my co-host, and someone who does so much behind the scenes, I have to always point it out, but Margaret Preston, president of Over Parkinson's, and we want to welcome everyone back for another exciting episode.
Thank you so much, George. I have the honor to introduce our next guest on the Parkinson's Policy Podcast. Dr. Deborah Cory-Slechta is a professor of environmental medicine, neuroscience, pediatrics, and public health sciences at the University of Rochester Medical School. She previously served as Dean for the Research at the University of Rochester Medical School and as the Director of the Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences Institute of Rutgers University. Her research includes both animal models and human studies focused largely on the consequences of developmental exposures to environmental chemicals on brain behavior. The work has examined the effects of developmental exposures to metals, pesticides, and most recently inhaled pollutants in animal models and human cohorts. In addition, she's focused on the combined effects of chemical exposure with stress and on a cumulative risk. These efforts have resulted in over 210 peer-reviewed publications. Dr. Cory-Slechta has served on the advisory panels of the NIH, the FDA, the Environmental Protection Agency, the National Academy of Sciences, the Institute of Medicine, and the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, and also on the editorial boards of the journals of Environmental Health Perspectives, Neurotoxicology, Toxicology Sciences, and Applied Pharmaceutical and Neurotoxicology. She has also served on the U.S. EPA Science Advisory Boards and the Board of Scientific Counselors. So we're so thankful to have her expertise as George and I have been navigating some of the pollutants and environmental toxins that are connected to Parkinson's disease. And we'd like to welcome her to our show. Dr. Cory-Slechta, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Well, as my colleague said here, it's an honor to have you and to be able to see you live and also get a chance to meet you meant a lot to me, and having this conversation means even more. Just wondering, if we get started, what encouraged you, to get into this line of work? It's not something that's easy. As a PhD myself, I can't imagine publishing so many articles throughout your career, and still doing so is always easy because sometimes the topics are tough. We're losing individuals like my mother, I feel strongly, due to environment and pesticides, but to have an expert like yourself in this field, just curious, what growing up, is this something, that sent you into this trajectory of the field?
I started actually, I got into research, I think, because my family, I was one of 8 children, and I was the second oldest and a girl. And so my job was to try to take care of all the ones below me. So I was always trying to escape. And there was right near the back of our house, a trail that went to something called the Stanford Museum and Nature Center. And they had rooms set up with microscopes and stuff. And I just remember so well the first time I went in there and looked in this microscope, it was just like this whole world was opening up to me, got me interested in science. And then when I went to graduate school, the big thing that was going on at that time was drug abuse research. And I was looking for something a little bit different. I felt like everybody was working on either morphine or amphetamine, and along came studies of lead exposure in kids, and a whole situation of kids showing up in emergency rooms, dying of lead poisoning. And that sort of got me into the toxicology world, which was literally just sort of starting. There were only 2 places I could even consider going for a postdoc research, but it was the lead that sort of started me down this road. And of course, it took until 2012 to get rid of that, but that was my journey there.
Thanks. Toxicology, I'm well aware because I'm also a police officer and attorney, and so that's a topic we talk about a lot, but it's so important to raise awareness and bring this topic into the Parkinson's community. And and Margaret might agree, but we've only seen these topics really discussed for 2 or 3 years since the national plan. But knowing there's individuals like you doing this, for your career, I think a lot of the work in the past is definitely going to come to the forefront. So thank you again.
Yes, I hope so. I think at the beginning a lot always for any disease, but this was certainly the case with Parkinson's, focused on genetics. And there was very little interest in anything environmental at the time. And it really wasn't, I think, until, we started seeing repeated um, publications of, something like Paraquat and Parkinson's disease that interest really got going, and it became clear that genetics couldn't explain it all. So it's been a long journey in that regard. Parkinson's isn't the only one that has seen the same kind of trajectory.
I'll definitely echo that sentiment. It's nice, everything's predicated, I know, in your work on data. And certainly that is so true in this instance that we're starting to actually have the data showing that such a minimal amount of Parkinson's cases are due to genetics. And so it's primarily an environmental man-made disease, as Dr. Ray Dorsey would like to say as well. So thank you for sharing that. I wanted to reference the very exciting forum in March of this year that just took place in DC. You were able to speak in front of this dynamic and inspiring group. What did that mean to you to be able to share your expertise in front of our Parkinson's community?
I mean, to me, that's everything because doing what I do, the real reinforcement is knowing that you're giving back. I mean, the taxpayers pay for our research, they pay for our salary, but for me, it's all about giving back, and to be at that forum and to meet people that have the disease, that are caregivers for the disease, people that are working so hard on policy. It's really, it's just a great thing. It's really something I appreciated.
Well, thank you for doing that.
And something that keeps me going, because unfortunately I lost my mother 6 years ago, and it's really, some days it's like, what am I doing? Because I can't bring her back. But when I saw you speaking live, and then, I mean, the first thing I did was text Margaret how amazing you are. And I was so excited. I didn't want to cut your speech off, but just to thank you, and that's, and today, our talk today, these are the things that keep me going and realize that, even though my mother's not here, we still have to fight for Margaret's family and also so many people in listening. And I hope they'll share this. I hope they'll support you. But another area that's important, again, is how research really does so much. It's not just in someone's opinion or maybe even just an experience, but when you actually sit there and do the research, speak to individuals, that's what's important. Your research has been instrumental in understanding environmental contributors to Parkinson. From your perspective, what is the most compelling evidence linking environmental toxins such as pesticides to the development of Parkinson's, and what should policymakers hopefully be listening a little bit closer to?
Well, I think probably, again, the most compelling evidence for a role of pesticides in Parkinson's disease is the Paraquat database that's out there. And I think, people don't maybe realize this, but the reason that Paraquat sort of came into the laboratory was because it had a structural similarity. It's a chemical that looked an awful lot like something called MPTP. Well, in the world of Parkinson's disease, MPTP was a chemical that got synthesized and was found to produce Parkinson's disease in 20-year-olds in California. And somebody recognized that, wow, this looks a lot like Paraquat. The person who did that was actually somebody working on frogs. And so, normally that's not data that I would see, but it came to light and it started to generate a lot of interest and people started looking at it. And I think since that point in time, it's probably, having done a lot of risk assessment documents and seeing databases for what we're using to assign risk, the strength of the database for Paraquat is very compelling, not just the animal studies or the experimental studies, which keep showing over and over and over again that administration of Paraquat can cause the loss of dopamine neurons, which is what underlies Parkinson's disease. But also, I think the epidemiological data has been very strong. It relies on things called odds ratios, and the odds ratios that I've seen in those studies are some of the highest. So they give you even more strength in that kind of relationship that's being looked at. I don't know of anything else that's as strong of a connection to Parkinson's disease as Paraquat.
And that's why research is so important. We've had a lot of researchers on the show, and it's interesting, even if you, not you, but someone fails at an experiment, it actually might be positive. So, we learn from each, unfortunately, exposure too, but these research are doing, I hope also we can share for many years to come. So thank you.
Yeah. I'd like to move into, advocacy and policy change as a result of Parkinson's disease. But talk to us about how can policy better impact those still living with the disease. Sometimes cure-based policies kind of seem a little intangible and a little late for those living with the disease. But how can policy better change ongoing environmental protections with meaningful support, accountability, and justice for communities that have already been disproportionately exposed to harmful toxins?
Well, I think what has to get out there more is how decisions are made about exposures, who can use these chemicals, how they can use them, et cetera. I think over the last couple of years, people seem to be very clued into nutritional situations and what goes into the food supply, but I don't think they understand how these decisions get made. So I literally talk to people because this decision about the use of Paraquat, how it can be used, et cetera, resides within the Environmental Protection Agency. But a lot of times when I talk to lay people that aren't in this business in particular, they don't have any idea. They might not even know what EPA is. They certainly don't know that what EPA is doing and how it regulates these exposures ultimately. And so I think putting more pressure on, first of all, educating people as to the way you want to go, the direction you need to go is to deal with EPA, to put pressure on EPA, number one. And secondly, to educate them in terms of how these risk assessments get done. Data comes in, a group of people sit and look at it. They make recommendations about what levels of Paraquat should be out there, for example. But then that recommendation is not just accepted, it goes back into EPA where there are decisions ultimately made about what can be used that include political and economic considerations. So there is a lot of room there, I think, to get people educated to begin to put pressure on EPA.
Absolutely. We talk a lot on the show in trying to instill a sense of meaningful advocacy for our listeners, how they can take bite size or larger chunks if they're comfortable to talk with their lawmakers or talk with people, their local representatives about what is Parkinson's, what is Paraquat. And that's, a lot of what we focus on the show to try to really instill that people can put education in their hands, especially some of these communities that have disproportionately been affected by toxins. Okay, what do we do now? There's still things that we can do to affect change right here in our local area. So I appreciate you kind of echoing the sentiment we've said over the last few episodes, that advocacy is something folks can do. Again, it could be bite-sized, it could be larger scale meetings, but it's definitely doable and something tangible people can do right now.
Actually, I find that it has more, I find that has much more of an impact in some ways than the scientific data. I feel like things move forward faster, better, when they come from the lay public advocacy than just from the scientific literature. And I think there's a lot of other examples of that over the years. So getting people together to do that, I think, is really a way forward.
And seeing the value in their unique story and being willing to share that.
Yes.
And we have an open call and email and phone and message to the EPA. So if they're listening, we welcome you on the show and love to talk to them directly. Sometimes with the federal agencies, they think we're against them, but we're not. The show is completely, bipartisan. We're not here about politics. We just want to end some of these toxins so that people like my family don't have to have loss. Margaret doesn't have to battle. And I don't want to say it, but you might have to find a different topic to research, which I hope so, because there'll be no more. But like you said, there's other diseases, unfortunately, too, and disorders. So as awareness grows on the show, like literally, I feel like we're making, we're at a time during history where the council is now seated. They're starting just June, which is, very exciting. Like for me, I always get ready to tell Margaret we got, we're kind of take a break, and then all of a sudden something like that happens, and there's no time for a break. As April round down, May continues, and her father still has to battle Parkinson's. So I always wondered about the Parkinson's Awareness Month, although it's great, it doesn't end just in April. As awareness, though, grows around the environmental risks more than ever, I feel, what specific policy changes or regulatory action do you think or believe are most urgent to reduce exposure and protect future generations also from preventable Parkinson's causes?
Well, one would be to eliminate the use of Paraquat. I don't know that you've already told folks this, but we're one of the only few countries left in the world that allows its use. The company that manufactures it, which used to be in England, got sold to a company in China, and even China doesn't allow the use of Paraquat. So that the banning of it in so many countries already tells you something. So again, getting rid of that would be high on my list. Another one sort of coming along, we've seen an increase over the past 5 or 10 years in studies of air pollution and Parkinson's disease. So what is it in air pollution that's leading to things like Parkinson's disease? And I think there's a couple things to be aware of. One, air particles can carry things like pesticides. And depending on the chemical structure of the pesticide and all that will depend on how much is in the air, how far it can travel, etc. But I think the other thing that is notable, and I'm saying this at a time when EPA is actually rolling back regulations for air pollution, one of the most prominent metals in air pollution is iron. And I don't know if you guys are aware of it or, how much this is known, but one of the things that happens as we age is that the brain accumulates iron, but those iron levels are even higher in the brain in Parkinson's disease, in every neurodegenerative disease. There's a significant dramatic elevation of brain iron. Nobody knows where it's coming from. It's been said, well, maybe your peripheral iron metabolism is broken or you have a leaky blood-brain barrier because it should stop that iron from coming in. But the fact of the matter is you are actually breathing that in your entire life, those air particles, and they're so small, they're going straight up your nose into the brain along with that iron. Is that a source of this elevated brain iron? That's something to really think about. And rolling back air pollution regulations at this point in time certainly isn't going to help address some of those kind of things. So, there are other metals as well that are in that air pollution, but iron is clearly taken up by the brain under these conditions. It's been shown in human brain, animals that are exposed brain. So again, it's another thing to think about. And I think the other thing, getting rid of Paraquat, one of the issues that always comes up is, well, then what are we going to use instead? There are always new pesticides in the pipeline, but I think, again, going back to how EPA considers and regulates those because they would have to go through a risk assessment prior to being utilized in the US, but putting pressure on EPA to include data on susceptible populations would be something else, more data on susceptible populations, to look for those kind of things upfront so that we're not finding out only when people start showing up with Parkinson's disease.
Thank you. I wanted to kind of elaborate on that. Oftentimes we do have the data, we do know what is fact, but regulatory action is often slow to keep up, which is, I think, sometimes why we're seeing right now a lot of action at the state level, which is good. But I wanted to kind of talk through that a little bit with the disconnect of science and what we learn to be fact and regulatory action. In your experience, what are the biggest barriers preventing research on environmental toxins and Parkinson's from translating into concrete policy change, and how can advocates kind of help close that gap?
Well, the whole cycle, as you can imagine, is relatively slow. So something like Paraquat has to go through review at EPA. And depending on, so it goes through what's called the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, Rodenticide Act. And it has to be done every, I think it's 5 years for something like Paraquat. So first of all, nothing's even being considered in the interim for the most part. EPA only has so many staff, and there's something like 80,000 chemicals in commerce right now. But all of these reviews have to keep going on. Getting together at that 5-year period, a panel of scientists that have to then come together and probably come together on multiple occasions to review the data, to write their recommendations. And then that goes, as I said before, back into EPA once those scientific considerations are over. They're basically recommendations. Within EPA, after that point, it's pretty, it's not very open in terms of how that ultimate decision gets made. It's very clear that politics and economics way into it. But those are not open discussions. Those decisions are made internally. We don't have access to them, and suddenly a decision simply appears. Why that can't be an open discussion, I don't know. It seems like it should be, since it's being paid for ultimately by the taxpayer.
I couldn't agree more, and especially on the piece of economics. And we can speak all day long to the cost and burden of Parkinson's disease.
Correct.
And so they often work in our favor as well, the economic burden.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Well, just in a short time together, I learned so much, and now we're going to have a show on just on iron and also air pollution. And that's the thing, even though Paraquat seems to be the number one, there's so many other things, even if we do ban, but it's a great start, at least at least we need a win for the community. So wanted to thank you again for your lecture when we met, for your time and friendship beyond just today. Can you leave a message of encouragement to the Parkinson's community today that I know will bring them hope?
We are going to keep asking these questions about environmental contaminants, and hopefully together with the folks, for example, that I met at the forum. First of all, I learned so much there, but we can start putting pressure on EPA and other regulatory agencies to start being more transparent, to regulate more quickly, and to, bring cessation of these exposures to the populations that are being affected by them.
Well, thank you again. I want to send the show to Margaret to wrap up.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much for your time and expertise. I think George and I talk a lot about Parkinson's kind of having its moment right now. The advocacy world is booming. It's a little bit more buzzy. We're all excited about change. And I think there's so many voices to be heard, so many stories to be shared. And I think the energy is starting to become palpable. And that's because of folks like you, your steadfast dedication to research, willingness to share your expertise, such as in forums like this, the DC forum, et cetera. So I can't thank you enough for doing the work that you're doing. And as George noted, my dad currently has Parkinson's, so it's tremendously and personally meaningful to me. And we, like you said, we move forward collectively, and we thank you for your work.
Well, thank you. I appreciate what you guys are doing as well, because, you're connecting us who, otherwise have difficult time connecting all of what we're doing to lay audiences. So I think that's great as well. And I appreciate you guys.
Well, thank you, Doctor. Thank you, our amazing audience. And thanks, of course, to my co-host, Margaret, Adam, and everyone behind the scenes at Over Parkinson. Please support them. Again, Doctor, honor to meet you. Hope to see you, even if not, I don't know if you'll be at World Parkinson Congress, but I'm sure maybe policy or we have a lot of work still to do together. And I do feel these shows live on beyond just this time. They can be shared. Everyone out there, please share it to your representatives even. And we have an open door policy here if it's something to help the community or even oppose it. I still wanted to have some individuals out there listening who oppose, banning things like Paraquat, because I love to, maybe it's just my mind, and I enjoy that. And it's not a bad debate, it's a positive one, and we can come together to important conclusions all together as a family in this fight. So I want to thank you again, everyone listening, everyone here with me by my side. This has been another episode of the Parkinson's Policy Podcast, where we advocate together to raise awareness and advance meaningful policy for the Parkinson's community. It's been an honor, pleasure, and we'll definitely see everyone soon. We still have a lot of work to do, and you can be sure the three of us will be fighting right by your side. Thanks, everyone.